It was so overwhelming when I first started because it's just a new environment, new country, moved the whole family up here, new climate, new everything.
Has there been a moment in your career when you thought, no, I just can't do this?
Yes, definitely. I don't think anyone would be lying if they said no. There were definitely some moments in the first year where I said, have I gone outside of my comfort zone? That imposter syndrome element kicks in, but I always manage to just stand up and keep going. I'm really lucky to have a very, very good network around me.
Very few people become the marketing director of a successful outdoor lifestyle brand by the age of just 27. But that's exactly the story of today's guest, Georgina Kirby. Today, Georgina is the general manager of the instantly recognisable base layer brand, Kari Traa from Norway. Georgina and I chat about her experience of working with several founders, the differences between working in an owned and operated founder-led business or private equity-owned business, as well as the impact on her career of stepping away to have her first child. My name's Dan Trapp. This is Sports and Outdoor Mentors. And if you like what we're doing, please like and don't forget to follow or subscribe. Today, I'm chatting with Georgina Kirby, the general manager of the uniquely recognisable brand of base layer Kari Traa from Norway. Georgina's had an amazing career. Very early stages achieved becoming a marketing director for a UK outdoor lifestyle brand. Then spent time in New Zealand with a merino base layer brand, Icebreaker. Then moved back to Europe, worked with a UK multi-brand global distributor and owner-operator of brands called Bradshaw Taylor, living, I think, in both the UK and France during those days. And now, as I said, is based out in Oslo. So welcome, Georgina.
Thank you.
Let's maybe keep the first question nice and easy. And actually, let's talk about the brand a little bit first, and then we'll get to you a little bit later. In one sentence, what does Kari Traa kind of stand for as a brand?
So Kari is a brand that is all about making women feel happier, healthier and stronger. So we're a base layer brand. We're founded by the Olympic gold medalist Kari Traa herself 25 years ago. So we've been around a long time. And if you think about base layers that really kind of bring to life Scandinavian climate and Scandinavian personality, that's Kari. So we're a brand that's all about building community, and we produce product that really fits women, and it's for her, by her. So we're a team of 26 women who work all around the world to make sure that we're producing the best base layer, mid-layer outerwear that women can need for their outdoor activities.
Great. Okay, so 26 women around the world. That's impressive. And as we sit in 2026 in the early days, what are you excited about when you look ahead to this year with relation to the brand and the business?
Oh, loads of things. We've got heaps going on at the moment. It's really exciting. So we've got a lot of growth happening in new and emerging markets. We're doing extremely well in Canada at the moment. So we've got some great retailers, great partners that we work with out there, and a whole bunch of really exciting athletes as well. So one of our athletes just got a gold and a bronze at Olympics, Megan Oldman. So
amazing.
Really, really proud of that. And then also in Central Europe. So in Germany, in France, we're doing really, really well. In those markets, we do extremely well within run, actually, where consumers have been choosing our base layer because natural fibers really perform extremely well in all climates for running for women. So we've always had a really good run business in France, and that's now really picking up as well in Germany. So we've got lots happening over the course of the next year. We just changed our structure in Germany. We've got Denise, who's been running the brand from a sales perspective, has just stepped up to take on the whole of Central Europe. So that's going on. And then over here in Scandinavia, we've got a load of projects ongoing to really kind of reignite the brand here. So to make sure that we're continuing to really connect with our younger community. And so we've got lots of community events going on. We call it Pink Power Clubs. So we've got these runs that happen in all of the major cities that we operate in. So we're really focusing on building community, and then we've got some really beautiful products that are coming out as well over the course of the next year. So lots happening.
Great. Yeah, well, there's certainly plenty of beautiful products in this room. So yeah, it's looking very nice. So as I mentioned, one of your early roles in your career was as marketing director for an outdoor lifestyle brand in the UK called Jules. And you were, I think, 27 when you took that position and worked very closely with the founder. First of all, congratulations for getting such an amazing job at such a young age. That's incredibly impressive.
Thank you.
But I'm really interested, looking back at that time working with the founder, what was the good, the bad, and the surprising about that experience of working so closely with the founder of a brand like that because it was the reasonably early days of the brand, if I understand well. Yeah,
it was very, very early days. It was very interesting because I came about that job through working for his dad in a cafe in Market Harborough. And what Tom Jewell, the founder, used to do was he would sit in the cafe and watch the staff. And he used to do this over a long period of time. We thought he was just having a coffee, but he was actually there to poach the best staff members to take them out on the shows and events. And the shows and events in the UK, so this is the country equestrian shows and events like Burghley Horse Trials, Badminton Horse Trials, all the big events up and down the country are a very, very good way to kind of cut your teeth at retail. It's raw retail. So what you do is you drive a van, and I started doing this when I was about 19. And there are a group of us that Tom has sort of gradually poached over the years from the cafe. And we'd drive these vans around to these events, and then you literally set the stand up, and it's beautiful. It looks like a shop. So you're setting it up, merchandising it based on the weather conditions and the consumer. Then you spend all day selling, and you've got to keep your energy up. And then you pack up, you count the money. So you're doing all the finances, and then you are driving to the next one. Often it's 2 days and then 1 day more setup and then go again. And we were doing this over the summers. And so it gave me this kind of real exposure to consumer right from the start. And it taught me, and this came very much from the way that Tom ran the business, real hard work and what real retail was, rolling up your sleeves and just getting on with it. And he had this deep connection to the consumer. And the consumer was always first. So he used to say to us, I can remember one time he said, right, I'm going to go and stand over there and have a coffee in front of the stand. And we used to have these long queues of people coming into the stand. He said, I'm going to go and have a coffee over there. And I don't care if people are walking out having bought nothing, but I want them to either be smiling or laughing. And then, if they ever had a return, if somebody had to bring something back into the stand, it was always that we had to deal with it loudly and we had to deal with it positively so that everybody else in the stand could hear that if they had a bad experience, that it was dealt with well. And so that kind of deep connection from the founder to the consumer has definitely stayed with me. And as I kind of worked my way up through the company, right from literally serving coffees in a cafe and just always putting my hand up and saying, yes, I'll try that. Yes, I'll do that, and doing the very best job that I could. Then when the opportunity came up after I finished university, where I did a French degree, so nothing to do with marketing or business or anything, and just quite like the idea of marketing. And he had a gap and I said, oh, please let me try it. He trusted me because I'd given it my go and everything else I'd tried. So I gave it a go at that point, and that connection to the consumer definitely didn't go away. So I kind of had quite a spidery role at that point. And Tom, because he was so entrepreneurial and such a sort of a classic founder, he let us run with stuff in a way that he needed to trust his people. He needed to kind of make sure that he'd surrounded himself with people who he could kind of coach and develop in a way that he wanted to run his business. And I guess that was part of the reason for having such young, fresh blood in, because of me and then Chloe Ward, who he hired in to do as creative director as well. And so it's a very, very long answer.
So that's all the good.
That's all the good.
What about the surprising? I guess probably actually everything was surprising at that stage because it was all so new. So somehow everything was surprising.
We had no idea what we were doing. And I think, and this is my experience with all the founders I've worked with as well, is that they can be very spontaneous and chase every opportunity that pops up. I was very young and naive at that point, which I think was actually a strong thing for the business at the time that we were. So we just tried things. And actually, actually we're at that lovely time it was the early 2000s when, everything was trending in the right direction in the market. So I think we definitely had the right tailwinds behind us at the time, so a lot of stuff went right. But I think, there was some stuff that, you're just thinking we can't possibly do that. And so everyone starts running in the direction because you pick up the ball and throw it in a direction and we all had to follow it. And sometimes looking back on it now, there's no way that I would do that now that I've got the experience in my career, because you go down a lot of pathways that you don't need to go down. And I think that they can be quite spontaneous. So they can take on every opportunity that comes their way because they think, oh, hang on, I can do that one as well. And Wellington's work. So let's try leather boots. And suddenly you're all chasing after leather boots, which is a massively complex and very different beast.
Yeah.
And you're all chasing after it, knowing that it's probably not going to work. And then lo and behold, it doesn't. You're back to where you were, and with a bit of wasted time and a few more grey hairs, even when you're 27 years old. So there was a lot of that. There's a lot more emotion. And certainly I see that now when I'm in a business that has a more formal structure, and we've still got founders involved here at Active Brands, which is fantastic. But the overall setup is that we have a more formalized, more, I guess you could say, professional boards and structure at the top. And that, that definitely tempers things and helps us to make sure that we really take our time and don't run after everything that comes our way.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that was absolutely one thing. But I think for early in my career, I think that the benefit of firstly being given this massive free rein to sort of run with it and just learn. And we just went for it. We just tried everything. We opened retail stores. We set up e-commerce. We just did it all. We built these stores, and where Chloe, who's the most creative, wild person I've ever met, and nothing's ever good enough for her, wanted to sell chickens because it was all, do you remember that period in the UK where it was all about chickens? And so she said, we have to sell chickens because this is all about country lifestyle. So we have to sell chickens in the shops. And I was there to kind of calm her and Tom, because Tom would have just gone, yeah, okay, we'll sell chickens as long as they got a good margin, we'll sell chickens. So I was there to kind of temper things down a little bit. So in the end, we had porcelain chickens on the walls in the stores, and we made the clothing rails with sort of garden forks. And at the openings, we had sheep because we needed to have some kind of farmyard animal to keep Chloe happy. So we did that. And they were great. We had massive queues around the corner, and we made all the press, and it worked really well. But that was where I kind of learned that sometimes you need to rein in creative and entrepreneurial people a little bit to get to the right end result.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Yeah. So it sounds like then somehow that period at Jules was quite a career defining, because I mean, it feels like you were doing so many different things that it probably really helped kind of shape your journey and who you are today somewhat.
Yeah, I think it did. I think when I look back on it, because, by title, I was marketing director, and certainly I owned the full marketing and e-com part of the business, but I was the connector at that point as well. I was the kind of the spider that, I helped work with the ops team. I at one point managed the customer service and warehouse and with the rest of the team, but I was very much kind of across all the bits of the business, looked after the logistics and the setup for a lot of the creative processes as well. And so I think, that I was really at that point kind of general manager in the making. I was never really a passionate marketeer. I like the kind of organizational side. I've always liked the numbers and the results. But, from a kind of creative point of view, I think that was always Chloe in our partnership. And, as I moved into my next role, I've always needed that kind of creative person to bounce off and to help me to structure ideas. I think in marketing, often it's actually quite rare to get people who have both the creative and the analytical side.
Yeah.
And as long as you're aware of that, I think then you team up and you make sure you got the right people around you. But within that worked really well because, our strengths completely were the opposite of each other's, but they worked really well together. So yeah, it was definitely career defining. And I think, I was extremely lucky to have that opportunity early on. It was horribly hard work. It was 7 days a week, all year. I can remember sitting on Christmas morning, mapping out direct mail plans on the floor at my in-laws' house with them all going, you're supposed to have a day off. It was such hard work. And I think that's why, my husband and I, we got married when we were 28 and then said, let's go off and do something completely different, which is why we moved to New Zealand.
Yeah.
Because we recognized that, it wasn't all about work and progressing your career. And although it was funny with Jules, because it's country lifestyle and equestrian. And I think as I've got further into my career, I've realized how important it is to really, really connect with the brand, the consumer, the product that you're working on. I think that makes you so much better at your job. And I was part of building that brand that was not quite me. It was a world that I understood and a world that I could connect with to a certain extent, but it wasn't quite me. And that was nice when I moved to New Zealand. I had Icebreaker in my sights, and that brand was me. And then to come to Kari, I've just completely found my home.
Yeah.
So, it was much more in that, in the outdoor space, and in, a brand that's got that kind of real sense of purpose.
Yeah.
And so it's nice to have started there and then to have could have worked my way towards something that really connects with me very deeply.
Yeah. So you worked with Tom, you then worked with Jeremy Moon at Icebreaker. Yeah. Kari, obviously at Bradshaw Taylor.
Yeah.
Now you mentioned that you're working with the founder here.
Yeah.
Maybe not as closely.
Yeah.
So as you just mentioned, you left Jules, you moved to New Zealand and were targeting a job at Icebreaker to work with another founder.
Yeah.
So maybe not quite learn the lesson of the downsides, but obviously the upsides outweighed that, which is great. And then you lived and worked in France as well. I'm interested, looking back at your experiences of living and working abroad, and obviously now in Norway and Oslo, what's the benefits that you've kind of felt of doing that, from a career development point of view?
I think there's a lot. I think you learn empathy, because you need to connect with people, often without understanding a language. So that's a whole different level. But also, even if you do speak the same language, there are cultural differences that are so nuanced that it can take a while to realize what those are. And so it takes really kind of living and working in that environment for you to properly connect and to understand those different cultures. And so I think that empathy, that ability to kind of step back and ask what the real question is. You might have a conversation with somebody and think that you know what the outcome is, and sometimes you don't. And, that can happen in your own culture and way of working, but it can definitely happen when you're working in different places, and it can be very, very subtle. And so I think that's one thing. I think also there's ways of working in each of those cultures that are kind of set by how society's set up and how the working environment's set up. There's really good bits, and then there's other bits that you might prefer in another place. And what's nice is when you move to a new environment, you can bring some of those with you in the way that you show up and the way you work. And I definitely see that if you work in an international environment, if you can get a team where you get a little bit of variety in how people work, it's a really good thing. As long as you make sure that you're open about it with the team and you're talking to them, you're not afraid to kind of highlight differences and talk through the implication of those, then it can be really enriching. It can really help. The things like communication, for example, with particularly, Norway's definitely been the most culturally different place that I've worked by a long way. And that was quite a surprise actually for me and it took a while for me to realize. And I think it's because the level of English here is so good that you almost forget that you're talking to Anglophone people. And there's a very different way of operating in Norway. Just the whole society set up in a completely different way. And I've learned so much from that. Really have. It's very, very, there's a lot of efficiency. The communication is a lot more efficient. I think I've always been a bit too verbose. That'll probably come across today. And in Norway, that's seen as, how do I put it? Not a weakness, but certainly not encouraged. You need to be precise and considered in your communication. And that's been a huge lesson to me. And it's something that I have definitely taken into my life personally as well. And I really like it. It's smart and it's a good way of working. But it's also challenging because we have offices in the States and we've got offices in Germany and we've got, so then I kind of need to be the bridge between those different ways of working and saying, hey, this is how we as a team work. And, just helping people to understand that communicating in a certain way doesn't necessarily, helping the team to understand that silence doesn't necessarily mean yes or no in Norway. Silence can just mean I'm getting on with it. Versus US, UK, we're always updating each other, checking in. And actually, do we really need to? Is that a bit of a waste of time? And so there's all sorts of bits and bobs that you can glean from working in different cultures that I think is very beneficial on a personal level, but also on a professional level.
So as we mentioned, you work with several founders. Mm-hmm. I'm interested, looking back at those experiences, maybe before Active Brands, what's the best, but also the worst of working with founders? And here you don't need to be specific, but just, from a general point of view, what do you look back on and think, that was amazing. And that was challenging.
Best is definitely the passion. And I think it's hard to find that deep passion and purpose outside of a founder-led organization, because it's real and it's authentic when it comes from the person that first came up with that idea.
Yeah.
So I think that's absolutely the best. I think the worst is probably managing the emotions, because
of the founder or of yourself?
Well, a little bit of both. Okay. But I think from my experience working with founders, there's such a deep connection with what they're trying to do, that if it can tip over to being quite an emotional roller coaster in some cases. So if you don't line up exactly with something, or if you challenge something, the response can quickly slip to being an emotional response rather than a rational response. Okay. Because it's when you've built something, it's like for a lot of founders, in my experience, the brand is almost, it's like a child. It's like a part of their very being. Yeah. And so you've got to be very respectful of that, and you have to realize and appreciate that. But it means also that you as a close team around them almost have to nurture that and then challenge it in a careful way, because otherwise it can be seen as very personal. Things can feel very personal.
Interesting.
And that's where you've got to have the right people around them in order to be able to kind of challenge them and push them outside of their comfort zone, so that they can make the right decisions and for the business. Because in some cases, you have to be careful to not get too drawn in almost. The most challenging thing can be for a founder, their business is very, very personal. Yeah. It's almost like their child, their baby, part of their family. Yeah. And so as somebody who works in their close team, it's different from working with a boss who's not so deeply connected with that. Yeah. So you then need to be respectful of that as well, because it's something that they've built. It can lead to quite emotional responses and can lead to quite unexpected responses at times, because it's not always, as planned, or, sometimes it's more than that. So there's a little bit more to navigate, I think, in that environment, around making sure that the way that you approach things is respectful of the fact that it's their baby, it's their love and pride and joy, that you get to play with the train set, but you need to do it with respect. Yeah. I think that's probably the most challenging thing.
You mentioned that in your time at Jules, you realised, again, because of that passion and that energy of the founder, the business was often going in multiple different directions. When you left Jules and you were at Icebreaker and then working with Kari, and were you able to kind of take learnings from that to try and implement maybe processes or organizations to bring in a little bit of, maybe I was going to say professionalism, but structure and process? But how do you get that, if that's the case, how do you kind of get the balance right? Because of course you don't want to kind of dampen the energy and the entrepreneurial nature of a founder, because that's fundamentally what got them to where they were at that point. But so do you get, I'm not sure I've articulated the question well, but how do you find that balance between bringing in structure and process and organization while not either being disrespectful or killing the kind of energy that a founder brings?
I think the two can coexist really well. And moving into Icebreaker was very well established and had really good processes and structures in place, which was fantastic, because I brought some of the learnings I got from Jules, learned a lot more, and then working with Kari and the team at Bradshaw Taylor, had the opportunity to bring some of those in. And I think what you need to do is make sure that you need to harness the passion. So that is a non-negotiable. but passion that the founder created and creates and continues to generate needs to be articulated in a way that is understandable and repeatable for the full team, because that basically is your vision, it's your purpose. If you can put that into words and in a way that the team can grasp and can use, and even kind of classic things like sticking it on a wall or a notepad, but and bring the team into kind of with the founder to bring that to life. And then, once that's there and that's embedded, and as long as it's constantly at the heart of things, and as long as then you hire the right people into the team that understand that, live that, breathe that, then a clear structure, all that can do is help people to fly and to take off. And I think, that's why Active Brands is such a great home for these founder brands, because here we've got multiple founder brands, and each brand has its own identity and still has got that very strong founder passionate part to it. But we're within a group that has rigor and structure, and we can kind of use the strength of being a platform essentially of brands, so that when it comes to things like supply chain, logistics, finance, you've got rigor and structure, but then within the sales and marketing bit, it's still all go from a very kind of that founder-led passion still there. And you can see that when you walk into this building, you can tell exactly which brand people work from. You've got the Dali lot that turn up in their kind of tight tops. You can see the heart rate monitor underneath running up the stairs, and the sweep protection. They're all looking very cool in their black caps. So, you end up, you can still create that really, really strong founder-led culture, but within a group that allows that structure. So I think, to your point, absolutely you can have both. But I think the passion has to be harnessed, and has to be the tight, central, non-negotiable part.
So, as you mentioned, you're now working within a group with multiple brands, and Active Brands is private equity owned. So that as well must be quite a different dynamic in terms of the way the business is run, but also just simple things like the different structure and process within a leadership team or within a board. So how have you because this is this is going to be your first experience within a private equity environment. So how have you found that? What's been surprising since you've started experiencing that?
It's really, really good learning for me, because I've been sitting on boards either as executive board member and what have you since I was 27, and it's always been quite an informal environment. So, obviously we've been doing all the same things and making sure that we're running the business properly, but it's been, it's a much more relaxed, casual meetings, and, we do our prep and we do our little presentations and what have you. And it's not like that. When you go into an environment where we have a lot more accountability and a lot more rigor to how we're set up, because, we're accountable to the board and we're accountable to all of it's extremely different. Although we're having the same conversations, it's elevated to a level which I certainly haven't been on boards like that before. So suddenly, I'm dealing with MBAs and suits, and so I just have to be more considered in my responses and a little more polished, which is a great learning experience. And I'm sure I'll get better at it. But I do find myself sometimes in small word soups. I'm just not, I'm used to much more of an informal environment. But the great thing is that, as a leadership team at Active Brands, we've got a real mix. Our CEO, Oystein, is from PE background. And, we've got Farhat, who's our COO, is MBA, and then we've got one of the founders, Eric. He's one of the founders of Kari, and he's our CSO. So we've got a mix in the team, which enables us to lean on each other and support each other, and so it makes for a really nice dynamic in the team. And also on the board, we've got a good mix of people from the two private equity owners that we have, and also from non-execs from the industry. And Chairman Petter, who's extremely experienced, both from a CEO perspective within various outdoor and sports brands, but, brings in that sort of real consumer first mindset too. So there's a good balance in there. It's definitely a different environment, and it's a challenging environment, and it challenges me and pushes me, but it's good.
Do you prefer it, or?
It's a good question. It's definitely harder, and I love learning. But I'm much more nervous and in those environments. I've never been nervous in board meetings in the past. It's going to be a nice casual environment and it's great. And now I definitely have to prepare more. So yeah, I think I probably do prefer it because I know it's going to push me and I'm going to improve and learn more. And ultimately it's better for me.
So having worked with so many founders over the years, I'm wondering, looking back, what's the best piece of advice you've been given from one of the founders? Or it doesn't have to be from one of the founders, actually. It can be from whoever you want. But what's the best piece of professional advice you've been given?
I think we had a guy called Kevin McSpadden who was chairman of Jules, and he founded a direct marketing agency that we used to work with called More To. And he's been an incredible mentor to me over the years. And he said to me, you just need to be comfortable being yourself. And I know it's a statement that people use. But I think to hear that as a young, professional who had terrible imposter syndrome and genuinely didn't know what I was doing back then, but he gave me the confidence to just keep doing what I felt was the right thing to do. And he was always there to kind of guide. He was kind of the yin to the founder's yang. He was very much structure focused and helped me and the rest of the team to think things through in a much more structured way that really complemented the overall team. But he always just encouraged me to believe in myself and to show up as me at work and not try and be somebody different.
Yeah.
And I think that I've always taken that with me and tried to encourage other members of my team to do the same, because we're all where we are for a reason and nobody's perfect in their role. But if we all just continue to do the best that we possibly can and to show up with passion and to work hard, we'll get the right results.
Yeah, for sure. So that's interesting, you mentioning imposter syndrome there. So other than that particular bit of advice, is there anything else that to use the language of today, any hacks to deal with that imposter syndrome? Because obviously this is something that affects a lot of people.
Yeah.
Probably or somehow most people. So other than that particular bit of advice, anything else that has helped you, let's say, control that?
One of the things is to be comfortable with it, because I don't actually think it ever really goes away. I think even when you talk to very senior people that you think of, are totally comfortable in their own skin, they still feel it. I think everybody has, anyone who's got any level of humility has it. So I think there's, it's just reminding yourself that it's normal to feel like that is the first step in the direction, and kind of acknowledge it. Okay, I'm feeling a bit imposter syndrome here. The next thing is just to prepare. So always, before you go into any meeting, whether it's with your team or your boss or a board, is always just to really think through what you're trying to accomplish, what the outcomes are going to be, and then just to prepare. It doesn't need to be a huge amount of preparation, but just give yourself the time to think things through beforehand, because then at least you're showing up in the best way that you can.
I think the point about the realization that it probably never really goes away is arguably the most important thing, because I completely agree. I think it doesn't. And then it's just about, as you said, preparing yourself and being conscious that it's there and kind of somehow trying to keep it in check by that preparation and working with great mentors. And I was going to ask, you talked there about the fact that person had mentored you. Have mentors like that or coaches played a important part of your career, would you say?
I wish they had more.
Okay.
And it was really interesting because at the panel that you hosted for Changemakers, we talked about how women are less likely to use their network. And it really sparked for me. I really thought, hang on a second, I think that really rings true for me. I think that would be my one regret actually in my career, that I haven't used my network more. It sounds terrible, but stay a little bit more in touch with all the great people that I've met and worked with all along the way. There's obviously, you make friendships and you stay in touch with people. But I think, when I've faced challenges, there's been more people that I could have reached out to over the years. But you always have this feeling, whether that's the imposter syndrome or you don't want to bother people, you don't want to, you don't want to waste their time. And it's something that I think I chatted to a few of my female colleagues about it since, that I just think we as women just don't do as naturally as as men do. I know certainly with my husband, he's just in touch with people, they just meet for a beer and have a chat, and they may not talk about work, but he's just better at having those kind of reach out points.
Yeah.
So I wish I had more. I mean, that's not to say that I haven't had incredible bosses and leaders and friends along the way that have helped me to learn and to grow. But I think I could definitely have done a better job of that to help me through and to help me to figure out some of the complex situations that I faced over the years.
Makes complete sense. And it certainly resonates with me. I mean, it's one of the reasons why actually I started doing the podcast, because it's kind of, to use your words, it's probably the only regret I have in my career that actually I didn't leverage either a coach or a mentor. And I do sometimes wonder, what could I have done if I had? But anyway, c'est la vie.
It's so interesting, isn't it? Because you just think, because you feel like you've got to add something back.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily how it works. And, you can just still check in on stuff. And it's always, I mean, I love it when people ring me and say, hey, I've got this going on. And what do you think?
Yeah.
And you just, spitball and have a chat. And I love it when other people do that to me. So it's a real shame. Yeah, I didn't do more of it.
Yeah. No,
still got plenty of time.
Exactly. So not wanting to focus too much on the negative, can you, kind of looking back over your career, is there any particular failure, to use the word, that you kind of sticks in your mind, but that you were able to kind of learn from, that's kind of really maybe particularly painful at the time, but actually in the long run, it's actually maybe you could be somehow net positive?
The main failure for me is not moving fast enough when team members weren't the right fit. And I think that from both sides of the equation, because I think particularly in our industry and when you're working on brands, which are so much to do with connecting with the consumer and making sure that you are really living and breathing the purpose of the brand. If you've got somebody in the team who is working counter to that or who isn't, you can just tell that they're just not feeling it. I think you both need to accept that it's just not going to work. Mm-hmm. And I think there's been a couple of times where I've, really kind of thought, no, this is okay. We can make this happen. And I think it's held everyone back, because it's not just, the rest of the team as well, need to feel that they're being supported, and they need to, that their passion is also being acknowledged and recognised and pushed forward. So I think for me, there's been a couple of notable moments in my career where I think I should have moved faster there.
But it's interesting because before we started recording, you were sharing a personal situation where you started in a role and after 10 days, actually you realised. So it's funny that kind of personally, you're almost maybe, I don't know whether overcritical is the right word, but in another situation, you're kind of looking to the positives, but on your own, for yourself, maybe not so much.
Yeah. And I mean, on that occasion, I made a big decision because I decided to leave a role that I was really quite comfortable in, just because I was working remotely and I wanted to work somewhere with people closer by. So I went for it. I made the leap, even though my gut was telling me this just doesn't feel quite right. And after 10 days, I realised this isn't right. From both sides, I just knew it wasn't going to work. And so then, thank goodness, and that would be big advice to people, is always do a great job and leave on good terms, because my previous boss just went, yep, come back. And so it was, a very short hiatus, but I think it's really important. I think as an individual, you need to feel it. You need to be invested, because you need to show up at work every day and really, really want to make it work. And you need a team around you that really, really enjoy their work and want the purpose to be real, and they want to succeed. And that only happens if people are fully invested. Mm. So you've got to hire the right people. Be rigorous about the hiring, and then you've really got to look after people as well, so that they feel that genuinely and enjoy their everyday work. It's so, so important. And then things succeed. But sometimes that does mean hard decisions. It's not all roses. Sometimes it does mean hard decisions. Yeah,
and we also make mistakes, right? Sometimes you get it wrong, and on both sides, as you said.
Yeah.
And I think it's amazing to me, because I'm not sure I would have been able to do that. But I think for sure, in the end, it's so much better for everybody. Mm. But having the courage to hold your hand up and say, look, okay, it's just not going to work, I think is impressive. And then another time so in fact, when you had your first child, you took the decision to step back away from work. So that must have been a pretty tough decision to take, I guess.
It was interesting because I think if I'd have been in the Nordics at that point, I wouldn't have had to make that decision. And, it's been a real learning for me moving here to see that it's possible. It's absolutely possible for women to have children, spend time with their children, and also have a really fulfilling career that's paid equally as the guys, because that just wasn't that option for me. It was, we couldn't both, my husband and I both be in a role that enabled us to give our daughter that focus. And so, I made the call, okay, I'll take the step down. And I think a big learning for me in that was that just because you step back in remit doesn't mean you need to step back in value. And I think, because I went into a part-time role, that's when I started at Icebreaker, as part-time marketing manager. But again, I just continued to just do the very best job I could. And so then an opportunity arose for me to go into interim general manager for Icebreaker New Zealand. And that came because my boss at the time, Jason Brown, he was an ally. He saw that it was possible. And I was going through a really tough time at that particular time. I was at the start of what I didn't realize would be a 6-7 year fertility nightmare. And he knew that. But he said to me, that doesn't matter. You can still do the job. I know you can still do the job. You just take the time that you need around the edges and you still do the job. But I think something in society was telling me that it wasn't possible to do both. So for a good 8 to 10 years, I kind of took a step down, and mainly in salary. And often you end up as a super hardworking, ambitious person, you end up accepting a lower salary because you're doing fewer hours. And actually you end up putting in
doing more,
just as much work. So I think if I had my time again, I would fight harder to be paid, I think, reflective of what my input was, as opposed to, and I think that would be my advice definitely to women, is that, just remember that you can still deliver at a very, very high level, even if you're working part-time. And I think, for businesses as well, I think that women, I see it now, I've got a team full of women who are with young children, and they are incredible because there's something about that time when you come into work and suddenly you're you again and you're using your brain again, and you're passionate about being a mum, but you're also passionate about being you. And I think you end up giving 120%. There's something in that, in the way that we're structured around the world for bringing women back into work after having kids, that I think we can do a better job of it. And I think Scandinavia is a good model for making sure that things are more balanced, because, and how they do it here is that it's just balanced. The guys also take paternity leave, and so parenting is just 50-50.
Yeah. So,
the dads are equally doing the kids stuff and as the mums are, and it's just more balanced. And so then it's not one or the other, it's, you can both do it. And so it's great for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. Thank you for sharing. And I'm interested, looking back on that long period, and I didn't realize that it was such a long period, did that somehow have a effect on your ambition? Because you're obviously somebody that is ambitious and motivated to do a good job. Did that somehow impact it that time?
I don't think it did. You sort of transfer a little bit that ambition into an ambition to make a second child as well. So obviously your focus is a couple of places, but it makes you just very. And I do think when you're going through something like that, then when you're at work, you're really focused on work, because you need that escapism. You need something else. You need to be not just this kind of baby making machine. You are still a human being with a brain and that who's capable of doing more and doing other things. So I don't think it did. I mean, when Daisy did come, my second daughter, and she came out fighting, but she tried to come out far too early. I was actually at a sales meeting and picking up a colleague, and ended up rushing to hospital 3 months earlier, and I was in hospital for 3 months, lying. Thank goodness for the French healthcare system, because she's here because of that. But I was in hospital for 3 months, and that was where, talking about founders, but I was working for Bradshaw Taylor at the time, and Kari's like the ultimate ally. So he said to me, you work when you can. It's just totally up to you. And of course, I was sitting in the hospital bed pretending to the doctors I wasn't, but I couldn't stop. I was still working from a hospital bed, and he was just fully supportive. And I think that if you can find bosses like that who, just spot where people need that extra little bit of space to work things through, then people give 110% back.
Yeah.
So I think for women as well, to find those allies along the way to help them to make sure that it is possible. You can do both. And I think we need it as human beings. You need to not just be doing. Certainly my feeling is that I needed that distraction and that sense of purpose outside of just making sure that a little one came out safely, which she did.
Has there been a moment in your career when you thought, I just can't do this?
Yes, definitely. I don't think anyone would be lying if they said no. But yeah, definitely. I mean, when I was in my early stage of my career, when it was just so overwhelming, we were growing so fast, that it definitely happened then. And I always managed to just stand up and keep going.
How?
I think through, I'm really lucky to have a very, very good network around me, and in terms of friends and family. I'm from farming background on both sides. And so I think that hard work has just been built into me. And I've always just watched my parents just pick themselves up and just keep going. And so I think there's a little bit of that. And it was never sort of pressure from them, but I always knew would be okay, because I'd been in that environment where, stuff's hard, but you get through it, and, you just keep plodding and it works out. And then when I came here, when I started this role, it was so overwhelming when I first started, because it's just a new environment, new country, moved the whole family up here. New climate, new everything, and then, I'd done that short stint of general manager at Icebreaker, which was absolutely fantastic and a really good grounding. But to step in when you're fully responsible for a big product collection, that needed a bit of reshaping, and the marketing we needed to look at, the sales structure we needed to look at, it was a lot of things to work out. And so it was kind of, where do we even start? But then also, whilst navigating being the only Brit in the business, there are other English speakers here, and every Scandinavian speaks perfect English, but there's something in that as well, that you have to kind of navigate the way of working and, how things are set up, and it takes you longer to figure stuff out. So there were definitely some moments in the first year where I said, have I gone outside of my comfort zone? But again, that imposter syndrome element kicks in.
Yeah.
And you go, okay, and my husband's brilliant at telling me, well, you're there for a reason. If it's not you, it's going to be somebody else, and they're going to be thinking the same thing. So just keep going. And again, brilliant boss, brilliant team around me. We've really accomplished a lot in the last couple of years. And that's, thanks to really strong teamwork. So that got me out of that hole.
Great example. What 3 pieces of advice would you give to future female leaders of the sports and the outdoor industry? I
think the first one would be, don't try and be perfect. I think we have a tendency, particularly as women, to want to do everything to perfection, and it's not possible, and that's okay. As I said earlier about feeling overwhelmed, it's often that's because you want to fix everything and do everything perfectly. But, that's not your job, and it's certainly not your job as a leader. Your job as a leader is to delegate and to do a good job of that, and to connect the dots and to set a clear vision. So you're never going to be able to understand everything perfectly and solve every problem perfectly. So I think that would be my first. My second would be, work in something you're properly passionate about. Because I think, particularly in sports and outdoor industry, there's no such thing really as work-life balance. You're always in some way working. I've just been on a week off, and you're wearing the product every day. And if you're not wearing the product, you're looking at what everyone else is wearing. And then you're going into the ski hire shop, and you're wondering why the base layer wool isn't full, and you're talking to the manager, and you can never really switch off in our industry if you genuinely do the sports and live the life that you're working on every single day. So it's important that you pick a brand that you're really deeply connected to. And that then brings, a real sense of purpose and passion that makes you love what you're doing and much better at what you're doing as well. And the next one would be, I think to surround yourself with people that support you but challenge you. So I think, in my early years of leadership, I found I was just employing little clones. You just find that you end up hiring people that are just like you. And that's not the right thing to do. You need people who push you and think differently to you and tell you you're wrong. And, but you also that support you and have got your back. So I think that would be my third one, is make sure that hiring's hard. You've got to be tough when you hire, make sure that you get absolutely the right people in the role, and then make sure that you've got a good mix of people that bring something different and that have different skills and that are better than you at most things.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely right. So if today was your last day and you were going to retire...
Oh my gosh.
Difficult to imagine, I'm sure. But what would your message be to your team?
That's a really good question. My message would be, enjoy your next leader, because I know that she's sitting in the team at the moment and I'm surrounded by such smart women in the Kari team. So that no one would be worried, because there's a clear succession, probably 1-2 people at least that could just step into my shoes tomorrow, which is just fantastic. Keep having fun. The level of fun in this business that has come from Kari herself. Kari is the most deeply authentic, fun person you have ever met. And that permeates through the team, and the energy that she brings is just amazing. So keep having fun would be my second one. And then keep obsessing the product would be my third, because we set out to produce the best base layers in the world. And we still, every single day, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to make our customers feel so comfortable and confident when they're out doing all the sports that we all love doing.
Yeah.
And that takes a lot of work, because there's always new and exciting things happening in product that we need to keep our eyes on all the time. So keep obsessing, getting that product absolutely right.
Great. Well, thank you very much for your time, Georgina, and thanks for sharing a lot about your story and all the work that you're doing here. It's been great to visit and get to know you a little bit better. And yeah, thank you very much for your time.
Total pleasure. Thanks, Dan.
I hope you enjoyed my discussion with Georgina. If you did, please leave us a 5-star review to help others find us. Next episode, I'm chatting with Dave Hanney, the CEO of Outkick, the vertical outdoor sports brand and multi-door retailer from the UK. It's an eye-opening discussion, so to make sure that you don't miss it, please hit follow on your podcast platform. See you soon, and thanks for your support.